Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all of you today. First of all, I offer you my greetings on this very auspicious occasion of the 67th anniversary of Baba Sahib's Dhamma Diksha, which took place on Ashoka Vijayadashmi in 1956. And I'm in Nagpur. I'm speaking from Nagpur. So I have been just to Diksha Bhumi, where every year the people come from all over the country, and it is said that about 1 million people visit there every day, every Dhamma Diksha day. So Nagpur is full of this emotion of gratitude towards Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar for showing the path of the Buddha and walking in the footsteps of the Buddha. So I met a lot of people from other parts of our country, and the people are going to come. So it's just Diksha Bhumi is just nearby my house here, like about a few kilometers away, 3 4 kilometers away from my house. So I would request all of you to please keep your mic on mute, please, so that we will have uninterrupted communication. So I'm just relating you that it's a festivity in Nagpur, and many people are arriving from all over the places. And to celebrate the context today, this great historic movement where the Buddhism came back to India as a kind of a mass movement, and the Buddhist history as such, as we know, Ashoka and Buddha and all the great figures in Buddhism, they contributed so much to the humanity, but we hardly hear about them. And there are historical regions, there are political, there are many regions that we have not heard of them. But as Baba Ambedkar had said, that the Buddha doesn't need a visa or passport to India. He is already there. And secondly, he said that the roots of the Bodhi tree in India are there. If we can nourish them a little bit, the Bodhi tree will flourish again in this country. So this is a very important theme, because the world, as we see today, needs the teachings of the Buddha so much. We need it in India. We need it all over the places. So one of the remarkable scholar practitioner, I would say, who is with us today, Dr. Frederic Moronval, and he is going to talk about some aspects of what really happened to Buddhism, the resilience of Buddhism, as it were. So he's a very special person, I would say, in a sense that he had this very broad sweep of experiences of the Buddhist traditions. He was practicing in the Tibetan tradition all his life, and he has spent about 3 years in a solitary meditation, as is the practice in the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. And recently, he's now residing in Thailand, and he was recently ordained to follow up from the Thai tradition, of which he is a part now. There is a tradition that for some point of time in your life, you try to become a monk. So Brother Frederick followed that tradition, and he was ordained as a Buddhist monk for some time. Apart from his very deep commitment to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, he's very deeply committed to what we can say truth seeking. His research mind tries to find out what has really happened, and the book that he has come up with, Tantric Buddhism, in Odian or Odisha, is a very beautiful, very fascinating topic. If we have some inkling about the Tibetan Buddhism, talk about Shambhala warriors and Padma Sambhava, his father, alleged father Indrabhuti, his daughter, and so it's a very fascinating world of Tantric Buddhism, of which we know nothing. And whatever we know about it, we feel that it's some form of Hinduism, isn't it? When we encounter the Tantric iconography, we are put off, because we think that it is not the Buddhism of Shakyamuni, but it is not so. We have to look at, as the famous Buddhist scholar Edward Cohn says, the caterpillar turning into a beautiful butterfly, isn't it? So it's a very beautiful, fascinating world that Brother Frederick has entered into through his very important book and through his scholarship. And today he's going to talk about it. And he has done a research in Nevaris Buddhism, which is another fascinating area, as if it is the continuation of Indian Buddhism. And then he has done some fascinating work in Uttarakhand. So I'm not going to talk more about Brother Frederic. We are not here to listen to me, but I just wanted to put up his introduction to you so that we know how esteemed speaker we have today to talk about this great topic that concerns all of us. So without much time, I extend my greetings to you and I welcome our brother Frederic and Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya. To you, brother Frederic, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mangesh. Yes, I'm so happy to be invited in India, even if it's through Zoom. It's already 6 years I've not visited India, and I really miss your country. So for me, it's a great opportunity. Thank you so much. And so you praise me too much. Thank you. It's your kindness. I have a little experience, and I try also to make my academic activities match my personal interest and involvement in Buddhism. I'm going to start my screen sharing. Okay. Can you see the first slide?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So I put the poster and also the symbol of Orissa or Orisha, because it will. I'm going to talk about this topic today. And just to introduce very briefly my previous field of research for my PhD, it was in Nepal about the Newar people. The Newar are the indigenous inhabitants of the Kathmandu Valley, and they are very little known. I'm so surprised when French people and others visit Kathmandu Valley. They take pictures of the old temples and they have no idea of this history. But the Newar people, for me, are really heroes of Buddhism. Since the 6th century, the date of the oldest statue of Avalokiteshvara found in the valley, since that time until today, they have taken the Buddhist tradition alive, mostly the Vajrayana tradition, but today also the Theravada. Just to show, this first book is in French. It's based on my PhD thesis, unfortunately only in French. And the second one, I wanted to thank the Newa people for helping me in my research. So I made a summary of my research in English and Newari with the help of a translator. And on the photo, you can see a Newar dancer, a friend of mine who can dance the tantric charya dance, Buddhist and also a part of Hindu tantricism, according to the Doha. The Doha in old Maithili or Bengali language preserved in Kathmandu since almost 1,000 years. So it's such a fascinating culture. I'm going to move to Orissa just after that. But I mean, they deserve attention, and they are also part of this question of the resilience of Buddhism in South Asia, because they have never stopped practicing. You see on the left side, tantric priest of the Newar tradition, and on the right side, some nuns in the Theravada tradition that the Newar are very interested in since more than 100 years. And for the people who are interested in this topic, there are two scholar experts in the field of Newar civilization. One English researcher, David Gellner, and one French researcher, Gérard Taufin, who has also been my teacher in the university. Now, on the topic of the resilience of Buddhism in India, of course, we can study that topic from many angles and many different periods, because Buddhism has developed in the context of other religious movements. They have interacted. And for example, if we take just the Vajrayana Mahasiddhas, the adept of Tantric Buddhism, as you see on these two pics of the Tibetan style of iconography, who practice in the cemetery. On the left side is contemplating the death of his relatives. On the right side is drinking in a skull cap. And then you see the other Indian religious ascetics like the Kalamuka, Kapalika, Pashupata, Lakula tradition, which do not exist under this name today, I think, but still we have the Agori, who follow Agora. As you see on this book, I think the painting is so similar to the Buddhist one. This is one possibility, one approach. We can also study the ashram and the mat, the monastic life, and the sadhus of other religious movements. Also on the philosophical side, it's very interesting to study the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara and the Madhyamika Buddhist philosophy of Mahayana. But we have to choose one angle, right? So today it will be a geographic sector and also a small part of the history of Buddhism in India. It will be about Orissa or Orisha, Orissa, I don't know the correct pronunciation. Let's say Orissa on the west, on the eastern coast of India. Orissa is very famous now for Buddhist history because of the so-called Diamond Triangle, which refers to three archaeological sites, very famous now, Ratnagiri, Udayagiri, and Lalitgiri. But still, Orissa is very little known compared to Bihar and Bengal. We all heard about the Pala, the Sena, and the Westerners also know Pala, Sena, Bihar, Bengal, but they don't know about Orissa. And why I took interest in Orissa, one Tibetan Lama took us for a pilgrimage in the Buddhist historical sites of India, some of them, some of the sites. And that Lama, from Tibetan parents, actually he grew up in Orissa, in a Tibetan camp, as a young monk when he was a kid and teenager. Now he lives in France, but he still loves Orissa and India so much. He took us to the sites that he knew when he was a child in Orissa. And I noted that my friends, French Buddhists in the Tibetan tradition, they had no idea. And as you said, Mangesh, the Indian period of Buddhism, which is so essential, I mean, everything comes from there, is totally ignored or very not known enough. Now, the Westerners who are in Tibetan Buddhism, they know about India through the vision of the Tibetans of the past. It's totally old vision and idealized visions. And I thought, okay, I will try to do some research to find some sources from Indian scholars and Western scholars and from anywhere to try to give a picture, a general picture of Buddhism in Orissa. And so in that book, I had also to introduce Buddhism a little bit because, you know, some people go to the practice without knowledge of the history and even the life of the Buddha and so on. So I think for few people, maybe it can be useful to start from the beginning. And the main topic was the Buddhism in Orissa and also the heritage. And about this, I would recommend two very essential books. Maybe they look old, like Sahu from 1958 and Donaldson from, I think, first edition 2001 is already more than 20 years, but they are really essential reading for people interested to discover this Buddhist heritage in Orissa. So the topic of today, the resilience of Buddhism in India. We are going to narrow the field to Orissa during the 15th, 16th century. Because it's at that period, of course, the monastery of the Ganges Valley and also of the Mahanadi Valley in Orissa, the Buddhist monasteries had stopped to function as such. But does it mean that there were no Buddhists anymore at that time? That's what we are going to see. First part, the Vaishnavism of the Panchasakha of Orissa. So, of course, everybody knows about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? And when the Vaishnavism, of Bengal started to spread in Orissa with Chaitanya. Of course, there were already a certain frame of mind, philosophical orientation in the mind of the people who have been nourished by Buddhism, and especially Vajrayana Buddhism, at that time since more than 7 or 8 centuries. So although the monasteries had stopped functioning, it was still in the culture, in the moral, in the vision of the world. For example, in particular, I mean, the concept of shunyata. We are going to talk a lot about shunyata, the emptiness, a very central philosophical concept in Mahayana. And also we are going to talk about sahaja, the natural state. And I have to say that for this talk, I take a lot of information from very useful books from 2 Indian scholars, The Cult of Jagannath from K.C. Mishra, and Sahaja, Cult of Bengal, and Panchasaka, Cult of Orissa from Sri Paritosh Das. Once again, it's old books maybe, some might think, but it's still unequaled. They are so essential. So another thing to take into account is the culture of Orissa is made of a lot of tribal cultural practices and frame of mind and social organization. And we can think that in the tribal communities of Orissa, the role position of women is very different from some other part of Indian society. From many respects, they have more rights, more freedom, more power. And probably this has also contributed to the success of the Vaishnavism of Mahaprabhu Chaitanya, that's for sure. This and the Buddhist ideas of equality, tolerance, sahaja, shunyata, I think all this has combined to shape Vaishnava tradition specific to Orissa with a Buddhist heritage. I'll try to show this. Second, yeah. So the keywords we are going to use several times. Shunyata, normally in Sanskrit and in Orissa, in the text, at that period, they use shunya with the same meaning, emptiness. Sahaja, the natural state. Mahasiddha, the great accomplished ones, so the adept who are accomplished in the Vajrayana practice. And the practice of union, which means sexual union, either in actuality or by visualization. There are so many ways in the sadhana of Vajrayana. And then it's very important to know that there were Buddhist people, but they didn't have monasteries since 2 or 3 centuries. And so when Chaitanya came to Orissa, during his lifetime, it is well known that he had the great ceremony of conversion to Vishnu, Vaishnava Dharma. It is said that 2,500 Buddhist men and women of Orissa joined this ceremony to enter this Vaishnava practice. But then they brought with themselves their Buddhist heritage. That's why the Vaishnava movement in Orissa is slightly different from the Vaishnava movement in Bengal, thanks to 5 disciples of Chaitanya, the Panchasakhas, the 5 friends, Balarama, Jagannatha, Yashovanta, Ananta, and Achyutananda. They were disciples of Chaitanya, but due to their Buddhist heritage, they gave a special flavor to this new Vaishnava, Orissa Vaishnava. Now I'm going to enter more into the detail of their practice. So these 5 Panchasakha, they used to encourage philosophical reflection and yogic practices, not only devotion. So, and also the Panchasaka, they contributed to the development of the theology around Jagannath worship in Puri, Orissa. And in particular, what they brought to the Jagannath worship is the concept of shunya. I have to tell a few words about shunya because maybe not everybody is familiar with this concept. Shunya or shunyata in Buddhism is really the founding concept of Mahayana, and is thanks to Acharya Nagarjuna that this concept took shape, and especially in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is very central to Mahayana. It really, we could say, it defines Mahayana. It exists in the 1,000 verses and 100, and even it can be condensed into one mantra. And the Panchasaka and all the Orissa people, after 700 or 700 or 800 years of Buddhism, they had this in their mind. And it's very concrete and real because we find this in their text. For example, first we have to say that in Vajrayana, shunyata, emptiness, is embodied by Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva, sattva means the being, right? And Vajra means like diamond or thunderbolt, which is a physical symbol in iconography. As you can see, Vajrasattva is holding in front of his heart. But it also means emptiness, or the view of emptiness, the sudden realization of emptiness that nothing can destroy. That's why it's called Vajra, hard like diamond, and also thunderbolt, like sudden light. And this concept of shunya comes in the works of the Panchasaka in the name of Shunya Purusha. So in all of their poems, mystical poems, we find the Shunya Purusha. It's very likely that it equals to Vajrasattva. Just the words are different. Sattva and Purusha means a being, and Vajra is a symbol of Shunyata. So they say, the Panchasaka, Shunya Purusha creates everything, is at the heart of all things, but nothing can affect it because it is emptiness. So the difference with Buddhism is the Panchasaka say Shunya creates. Shunya Purusha is a creator. It sounds very theistic. And in the Prajnaparamita, or in the Mahayana Buddhism, they will never say that emptiness is creating anything because it's not someone. So here we can see that we are at a period when there were no more Buddhist monks since 200 or 300 years in Orissa, probably. No open teaching anyway. And so the understanding of the philosophical concept of Mahayana was not transmitted anymore. But the idea remained in the language, in the mind. But there is a shift. So from the Mahayana Buddhism, which was there, and the Vaishnava tradition which came, it mixed, and the intermediary stage is like that. The Vajrasattva, who is nobody, becomes the Shunya Purusha, the being of emptiness. So it sounds contradictory for a Buddhist, but it's really a very key moment in the religious history. But the concept is slightly changing of meaning. In Buddhism, emptiness does not create. Emptiness is emptiness allows things to appear. Because things are empty, there is no blockage, so anything can appear like a dream. But in no case there is something like which is creating like a god. So this is the common point and also difference between the Panchasaka and the Mahayana Buddhism. But they use the same word. Now we go into the more in detail into the text. Chaitanya Das, not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Das, who was, we can say, a friend, colleague of the Panchasaka. He wrote this Vishnu Garuda Purana. And he writes, the incomprehensible being has neither form nor color. He is the great void. And he remains in Shunya with the Shunya. But there is only Shunya. It's really sounds like Mahayana. But he talks about a being. That is very characteristic of the Panchasaka philosophy, of the transition from Mahayana to the following tradition of Orissa. And also, he says, in his Niruddha Mahatmya, another of his writings, below is the manuscript, a page of the manuscript kept in the National Museum of Orissa. The beginningless and the shapeless Lord fulfills the desire for emancipation of the living creatures. So there is a Lord, but he has no shape, almost no existence, but he's acting in the name of Ishvara. And the last sentence, for the good of the pious, he assumes the comprehensible form of the void. So I'm not sure of this sentence, how the void can be comprehensible form, but anyway, there is the concept of the form. We should see the original text in the Oriya language, right, that I could not do. So we find in all the Vaishnava writing of Odisha, of the Panchasaka, similar descriptions of the being of emptiness, Shunya Purusha. He's also called the Virat Purusha, Nirakara, Adi Brahman. Adi Brahman sounds very much like Adi Buddha. So, and also, like Vajrasattva, Shunya Purusha is defined as the union of Shunya and Karuna. It's a very striking feature. I mean, only in Buddhism, especially in Mahayana, we find that again and again. Reality is described as emptiness and compassion. Since 2000 years, it's like that in Mahayana philosophy, so including also in Vajrayana, which is also based on Mahayana. And the Vaishnava of Orissa use this terminology. So, and we'll see other examples, but it's already now in iconography also, in the instructions for meditation and visualization. We can see that the Vishnu Garbha Purana of Chaitanya Das speaks of a mandala of the 5 primordial Buddhas. So it's so interesting. And the way he describes the 5 deities really reproduces the colors of this mandala that I'm showing now, the mandala Vajrasattva of the Buddhist tradition. Just instead of Vajrasattva, there is a Vishnu, and the 4 others are also Vishnu of different colors with different animal vehicles. But the colors are the same, the disposition in the cardinal direction are the same also. They also have seed syllable and correspondence with the prana and chakra and all this esoteric knowledge. So it's not only the vocabulary of Shunyata and Karuna, but also in the iconography, in the symbols. Another example, in the Prem Bhakti Brahma Gita, another important text of that period, there is a myth of creation, cosmogonic tale, which said that the Shunya Purusha creates the 5 elements, and in the process there is Adi Shakti, and the universe is unstable, and so Adi Shakti has to unite with Vajrakila. Vajrakilaya, as is on this picture of the Tibetan iconography, is one of the main, very important and most ancient deity of Vajrayana, with this very name, Vajrakila. it's more than a coincidence. But then in the context of Orissa, and especially in the Jagannath tradition, there is Krishna and Radha, right? And they stay in the Golok. And in the text of these traditions of Jagannath of that time, the Golok is described as the Shunya Mandala. And it is described with the structure of mandala very similar to the mandala of Hevajra, who is a very also important, one of the main deities of Vajrayana. Now, in the Shunya Samhita of Achyutananda, the Panchasaka, we find Shunya Mandala, Shunya Mantra, and sometimes it's called Nirakara Mantra. And also there is the name of Buddha Mata. And there are dozens of common vocabulary of this kind. Then in Balaram Das, in his Gupta Gita, again we find the Shunya. Guru is Brahma, Hari, and Hara, and he is also the formless void himself. Formless void must be translation of Shunya and one other adjective. So the fact that the key terms of the Mahayana and Vajrayana philosophy have survived is really I think the proof that Buddhism was so deeply rooted in the mind of the Oriya people, even after 2 or 3 or 4 centuries after the destruction of the main monasteries. It could not be otherwise that it influenced the following tradition which took place in Orissa, which is Vaishnava tradition. Another book that is very essential for this topic is from Tandra Patnaik, Shunya Purusha, Bauddha Vaishnavism of Orissa. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Patnaik didn't continue in this field, but this book is so precious. I really recommend. And then another thing, Achyutananda praised Gata Yoga, what he called Gata Yoga, which means Kaya Sadhana, as mentioned by Dr. Patnaik. It's so interesting because we find exactly this in the Vajrayana tradition of the Mahasiddhas. Achyutananda praised the body practice, Gata Yoga. And as Dr. Patnaik mentioned, is her words. She's commenting the teaching of Achyutananda. A person who has mastered the art of Gata Yoga or Kaya Sadhana has no need of all that is contained in the Veda and Shastra. For such a person, the idols we worship are nothing more than just pieces of stone. This view of the practice as really an inner practice, that we have everything that we need within our body and our knowledge, of course. We find exactly the same in the Vajrayana tradition of the Mahasiddhas many centuries before. For example, Saraha, one of the first and really the main Mahasiddhas, he said, I have not encountered another temple as blissful as my own body. And we can find other quotation, quote like this. Then that's for the Panchasaka. But very soon, the king Prataprudara, who ruled over Odisha from 1497 to 1540, is 43 years, gave a hard time to the Buddhists. And so they had to hide. And that's why this part number 4, hidden Buddhist or crypto Buddhist. I could not find a pic of a hidden Buddhist, so I have a hidden elephant. But it gives actually the idea. He's in the forest, and we'll see that exactly what happened. So because we find again in the writings of Achyutananda in his Shunya Samhita, treatise on emptiness, he mentions several sects, religious sects, movement, who are carrying on their practices in secrecy in order to escape persecution at that time, so beginning of 16th century. So Achyutananda, he names the Nagantaka and the Yogantaka, which are, according to Patnaik, Nagantaka would be the followers of the Madhyamika of Nagarjuna that you see on this book cover on the right. Nagarjuna is on in the left picture, and Yogantaka, they would be the follower of the philosophy of Asanga, the Tibetan style painting on the right side, who was the proponent of the Chittamatra Yogacara, Yogantaka, and Nagarjuna, Nagantaka, and also the followers of Goraknath. We can see here on the right side the Tibetan type of iconography of Goraknath in the Mahasiddha Vajrayana tradition. On the left side, the same Goraknath in the Indian modern iconographic style. And also Achyutananda mentioned the Nera Neri, shaven head men and women, which could have been either monks or communities who kept some symbols, maybe from the time of the monastic life, like shaving their head. It's difficult to know. We just have this name. And he mentions the bows. Now, these practitioners, they used to hide in the forest of Orissa during that period of persecution from Prataprudra. And for example, Achyutananda gives the name of gurus who were teaching yoga to their disciples in the hills of Orissa, in the forest, in the caves. They were hiding and practicing in the caves. That's very interesting. He presents them as Buddhist gurus, although the names like Swami are not usual in Buddhist tradition. And then Achyutananda himself, so it's really an important person in that history of Buddhism in Orissa. He claims to have received vision of the Buddha and to have received advice from him to practice in secrecy to protect his life and the life of his disciples. And also, he claims that the Buddha gave him the Shunya mantra to practice. And so Achyutananda went in the forest of Orissa and visited the communities who were practicing in the tradition of Varanga Swami, Lohidas, and Virasima that I mentioned before. And it seems that they practiced meditation on Shunya. At the same time, they didn't talk of Vajrasattva or any Buddhist deity. They used to talk about Krishna and Radha, but on the basis of Shunya. It's a really key moment in the history of Buddhism in Orissa. That's why when the Buddha Guptanath, who was an Indian practitioner of the Nath tradition, he met the famous Tibetan historian Taranath. He told him that, yes, in Orissa there are still Buddhist communities. He was probably referring to Varanga Swami, Lohidas, and Virasima that Achyutananda was talking about. And then, in spite of this resistance or resilience of these practitioners, a hard time came when in 1568, Odisha was incorporated in the Sultanate of Bengal. And then the famous Army General Kalapahar gave a hard time to everybody, Buddhists and Hindus during that time. After that, we don't have a trace of communities of ascetics having practices or using concepts referring to Mahayana philosophy. Also, there are other things to tell in the following centuries, but for today, for this specific topic of the Panchasaka and what they kept from Buddhism and how they transformed it. I think that it's okay. And so, as a conclusion, we started with the question of the resilience of Buddhism in Orissa. Can we say that there were Buddhists, there were really hidden Buddhists, these communities hiding in the forest of Orissa in the beginning of the 16th century to escape the persecution? Achyutananda claims to have received teaching from the Buddha, and we have seen the vocabulary, the concept, but can we say that there were Buddhists? According to the definition, the standards of the Buddhist schools of the past until today, we would answer no, because in their text, they don't say that they take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And they don't mention the Four Noble Truths. So this is really the basis for all the Buddhists of the world. So from this criteria, we cannot say that they were Buddhist. In their writings, the only indisputable Buddhist elements were shunyata and karuna, and also sahaja, the natural state, the result of the Vajrayana practice. That's all we can say. And of course, in general, in the Orissa population of that time, it's quite sure that they still had these values of equality between the people and generosity and all these values which explain the success of the Vaishnava tradition at that time in Orissa. I think I'm going to finish on this point. And of course, I would recommend, because I gave just a glimpse, I would recommend the teaching of Mangesh. Really, it's so rich. I learned a lot, and so yes, it would be my final advice.
Brother, actually, what you did today is has given us, as you said, a kind of a dimension of many dimensions. And there are many ways by which we can talk about what happened to Buddhism. And what you have done today is a wonderful thing in terms of choosing a place which is Orissa, considered to be one of the last forte of Buddhism. And now, as a lot of new information is coming, people are saying that there were a lot of Buddhist elements. Like, for example, the last abbot of Bodh Gaya, Sariputra. And Bodh Gaya, it completely changed the history of Bodh Gaya, that Buddhism was active in the 13th and the 14th century in Bodh Gaya, because there was an abbot, Sariputra, who was not only active in Bodh Gaya, but he has gone on to visit Tibet and China with the architectural plan of the Mahabodhi temple. And you just related about the great monk Buddhanath, Buddhaguptanath, whose journeys have been preserved by the Buddhist historian, I would say Taranath, who sort of gives us a kind of what the state of Buddhism at the time. And one of the questions that has often been raised is, what do we consider Buddhism to be? So one of the things that you said, that taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, and also having some idea of the Four Noble Truths. But if we explore deeply in terms of what you have just mentioned, like the mention of the Shunya, and one can say that the Shunya is a proprietary teaching of the Buddha, because it goes back to the Pali text where the Buddha talked about in Majjhima Nikaya, I guess he talks about Chulla Shunya, or small Shunya Sutta, or Mahashunya Sutta. And of course, Nagarjuna has taken the idea from the Kacha and Gutta Sutta about what does the Shunyata all means, and the idea of the yoga between the compassion and wisdom. As Saraha says that Karuna Rahita Jo Shunya Laga, Nahi So Paave Uttam Marga. So I think the bigger question that we have to raise today is, what does being a Buddhist mean? And I think if we talk about Sahaja, because there was a blind poet in Odisha whose name was Bhima Boy, who talked about the Mahima Dharma and Sahajya. And Sahaj is a very important concept now. We can go on talking about it all the time. And as Kabir says that Sahaj Sahaj sab koi kahe, Sahaj na chinne koi. That everybody is talk about the Sahaj Sahaj, but nobody understand what is the meaning of the word Sahaj. And then you talked about, the poets, the saint poets like Kabir and Raidas, they talk about Nirvana, and they talk about the particular practices of Surati and Nirati, internal practices by which we can cultivate the field of Nirvana. So, what you have done today is something I think is very important, that you have gone into the textual sources and brought out the threads which are very important to be pulled up and thought over. Because in the Indian so-called Bhakti tradition, there have been, as you know, two stands, Saguna and Nirguna. So Saguna Bhakti is towards physical attribute, and Nirguna is, of course, links directly with the Shunya. And all these, sons, particularly Kabir, Raidas, Namdev, and I don't know, you please tell us whether this name Achyut, what does it mean, Achyut or Achyut, because this in Indian parlance, this word particularly, I don't know the philological meaning of it, but as you are describing this great man, Achyutananda, as somebody who appears to me like a social outcast, in the sense of living in a secrecy, always afraid of, being exposed to something, that would threaten his life. And I find this complete structure that you developed in terms of your talk today a very interesting one, because uh, Odisha, of course, can give us the rich information as to what happened to Buddhism at the end. But also now people are talking about Buddhism being present in Maharashtra in the 14th and 15th century, and in some of the Jain manuscripts, the about 16 pakhandas of the Buddhist are mentioned, and pashandas of Buddhist are mentioned, and the names of those pashandas are found commonly among the untouchable communities. Actually, they are found only, some of them are only found in the untouchable communities. So, Brother Frederic, it's a very amazing that what you have put forth, and of course the concepts of Nirakar, that has been, in the Buddhist philosophical tradition, the word Nirakar and Akar, Sakar and Akar, are very prominent words. And I thought that the way you have talked about the continuation of a thought process, and the Buddha being even referred to as in the visions of Achyutananda, is something, which I think many of us have never heard of, and we are talking about the 15th 16th century. So, people generally attribute the disappearance of Buddhism to the invasion of the Islamic armies, 12th century. So, what I thought today is, can you please throw some light on the social milieu of the time, in a sense of, the tribals like Shabars, and there are iconographical images of the Parna Shabari, in the Vajrayana Buddhism or in the Tantric Buddhism, and reference of Dombi, like the untouchable women, and outcast women, and Sarab apparently learned from her, and outcast women. So, how does this all social milieu, ties up with Buddhism, in a sense of understanding? Like, for example, the Nirguna Sant that I talked about, they all were from the non-Brahminical background. Kabir, Raidas, Namdev, all these great people who talked about Nirguna Bhakti came from the so-called non-Brahmin background. And there are some dohas which goes into this, that, they, through the realization of the Shunya, defeated the pride of the established priesthood. So, I just wanted to have this little dialogue with you as to how do we understand the social milieu, because it is said that the word Naga is also, found commonly in Orissa and generally found among the untouchable caste. And then the word Naga has not such a good praise now, but in the ancient time, the word Naga was like, very a name of pride. And there is of course the mention of Vajranag in the Ratnagiri. He gave the well. So can we make some sense out of this sociological aspect? And I hope you understand my question,
Yeah, sure.
brother.
No, it's true. Okay, if we go back to the Doha and the teachings of the Mahasiddhas, um, in many texts we see the instruction to respect every woman, even every female, because the Vajrayana is very much based on the male-female concept. No? So and the texts are very precise. Sometimes they give the list of all the kind of women, a list of caste, list of tribe, list of profession. And so this kind of text, yes, give information on the society of that period. When they say even the woman is from a high caste, or she's selling, I don't know, oil, sesame oil, which seems to be a very low work, or she's, of course, she's selling alcohol, or she's prostitute, or she's old, or beautiful, or ugly, or young, or whatever. We have to worship and respect them. It really takes the counter. It seems to contradict, yes, some rules of that time. We can guess the rules from the people who do efforts to contradict the rules. You see what I mean? So yes, these spiritual texts they come from a society, so we can find not only historical elements but also information on the way of life at that period. So it can be studied from that angle also.
A very good, very beautiful comment. Just before I open up it up for people, if they have any clarification or question or remarks to make on your presentation today, I just wanted to, ask you about, how this ideas of Buddhism, or the secret societies like Guhya Samaj, the Gana Chakra that were hold, where the Buddhist, or maybe the Tantric Buddhist, sang the dohas and celebrated the community life, and ate together, dying together, without any sense of caste or class or gender or whatever. I find that very interesting, the process of Gana Chakra. Do you find such kind of a gathering held uh, during the time? Because I think this is very important, that how the Buddhist, the prosecuted ones, could they find some ways to gather like they used to do in terms of the Gana Chakras, or is there any mention of any such things in the latter literature?
You mean at the time of Achyutananda?
Achyutananda, or a few centuries here and there.
Well, of course, we have very scarce elements, huh?
Right.
But we don't even know if there were women in the forest communities
Right,
of
right.
the hidden Buddhists.
Mhm.
We know the name of the gurus; they were all men.
Right, 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 right.
So it's difficult to say. And also the practice of Gana Chakra has evolved since 14th, and I mean, yes, if it started maybe in the 7th century, maybe in India. So it's a long time. And in Tibetan tradition, there is still the Gana Chakra regularly every month on special occasion. But of course, it has evolved through the time. So the practice at that time, the practice at the time of Achyutananda, the practice of today in the Vajrayana Tibetan tradition can be quite different. No? But anyway, you are right. There is really this question of equality and non-discrimination between the sex and between, of course, the social origin. But even today, I show a pic of a book on Agori. This book is very interesting. The teaching of one Agori master of today, I mean, on the 1980s in Mumbai. It's very clear that there is also Buddhist heritage in that, because it's really the goal is to free oneself from a lot of misconceptions against others on the basis of their social origin and sex, age, beauty or not, rich or poor, and all this. So yes, it's really that's why, you know, in Nepal, maybe one day we can talk about this, but the Vajrayana practitioners of Kathmandu Valley of the Newar, they could survive only because they organized themselves in caste system because of the pressure of the social environment. And today, this is the main critics that the Newar people address to their Vajrayana priests, that they said this is not Buddhism. We hide the teaching from others on the basis of the birth.
Yeah.
They have no answer. It's the generation of their tradition. Yes, it's something they have to correct.
Right,
Yes,
right.
so you're right.
No, brother Frederic, I find, you know, the kind of templates that are coming up to study what happened to Buddhism, particularly. I think there is a lot to be learned from Newari's Buddhist tradition as to what, you know, to reflect back on what might have happened, you know.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of now manuscripts are coming up where people are Odia manuscripts and other manuscripts. So I think it's a fascinating area that, you know, you have just exposed a bit of it to us, and I know I sure know that there is a lot to glean from your great book, Tantrayana Buddhism.
I hope so. And actually, as I told you when we chat, in this book is also to show that there are many scholars in the past and the present, Indian or others, who gave valuable contribution. Sometimes just by one book. Sometimes it was 100 years ago, a forgotten book, published in British Bengal of that time. And I wanted to pay homage to them by quoting these sources and listing all these scholars in the bibliography of the book. So this book, where I don't add anything. I just collect and put together and try to make sense of those information. And I really encourage the people maybe to have a look at the bibliography first, then to read other scholars. It's just a kind of synthesis. But yeah, if it interests some people, I'm very happy.
So just a final, my comment for me, the Puri Jagannath temple has been a point of controversy because, you know, the untouchables from that area, they claimed at one point of time that Jagannath is their lord. And at the time of the British, you know, they opened up the fire and a few people were wounded there. And Kabir mentions about his affiliation with Puri. And I think there is something mysterious in Puri that needs to, unlock in terms of its Buddhist history. So I will stop here and I will open the room for anyone to have any comment or any reflection or anything specific to ask to Dr. Frederic here tonight. We will spend another 10 minutes and then we will end.
For Manga, just one thing on Jagannath, I will say just one thing.
Yeah.
In Indra Bhuti or Indra Bodhi, King Indra Bodhi of Shambhala, father of Padmasambhava, he left some writings about Vajrayana practice. These writings we can find few in Sanskrit, original Sanskrit, and others in Tibetan translations. And one of his main texts start with salutation to Jagannath.
Wow.
In the 8th century. At that time, there were no Jagannath Puri as we know it today. So, and this title of Jagannath is not used for any other gods. So this is also one, it opens another door of research.
Very true, very true. Jagannath, Loknath is all the names of the Lord. And, you know, fascinating indeed. So please, any of you who has any comment to make or any specific question to ask to Brother Frederic here, So this is an opportunity for you.
I see one question in the chat.
Okay.
Karma theories. Yes, karma.
The landmine.
Vajrayana, Vajrayana is based on the philosophy of Madhyamika, the middle way, middle path. So this concept of middle path has many implications, but including, yes, karma, of course, has to be taken into account. Is so important. But they say to make karma something really solid and which will give us stress and fear and attachment, like people who will use karma only to have a better life in the future. It's a wrong way also. But the opposite is also a mistake to say that there is no karma, I don't care for anything. If we think like that, we will soon face problems also. So for Vajrayana, yes, I think Vajrayana anyway follows the middle path. So yes, it has to be taken into account, but not to the point to be stressed and to judge others with the pretext of karma theory. Yes, and Jagannath, Jagannath as Lord Buddha. Well, the book of I think Mishra in Mishra and Patnaik and Das. I don't know which slide it was. Cult of Jagannath. Yes, the book of Mishra, K.C. Mishra, 1971, The Cult of Jagannath, published in Calcutta. This is a must read for this topic. And some other information are found in the book of Das, Sri Paritosh Das, Sahajaya Cult of Bengal, little bit. Yes, and Patnaik, we can pick up some information here and there, but it's still to be studied and researched more. Yeah.
So any of you has anything to ask before I conclude for today and have Brother Frederic to say a few words at the end? If not, then I think we are coming to the end of our beautiful special lecture on a very important question. I think the greatest mysteries of the mysteries in the history of the world as to what happened to Buddhism in India.
Yes, that's true. And Mangesh, I agree with what you said before. After that period, of course, there is the Mahima Dharma and Dhamma Thakur and other things which are also very interesting. We could talk about that, and I hope yes, we'll have other occasions, and
Yes,
I hope I will have occasion to go to India to meet all of you. Also, it would be a great pleasure.
that would be wonderful if you can come and talk in person about some of this topic. Maybe we can have a workshop or a seminar. I think I find personally this topic is very important, and I'm realizing the value of it even in terms of the Buddhist practices. So history is not just about the history to know what happened in the past, but it's also how the practices were tailor-made for the time, and everything reflects back onto you. Instead of how you can become the Buddha within this own body in this very lifetime. And I think this idea that the Buddhahood can be achieved here in this very body and in this very life is something revolutionary and something very unique. It gives such a confidence to all of us. And this I was very fascinated by your use of the word Kata Yoga, because the kaya sadhana, and time and again we cannot but look at the Satipatthana in terms of the first practice of Kayanupassana. And this is taught very sparingly, but I'm sure that the later on the Buddhist have taken these methods that were unleashed at the time to different levels altogether.
That's true.
So I found this finding the Buddha within your own body a very interesting idea, and this latter Nirguna saints say that if you can dare, you can awaken the Buddha within, isn't it? That's up to us how we can awaken the Buddha. It's a very fascinating set of ideas. I would say almost mind-boggling, the kind of answers that we are getting in response to what happened to Buddhism in India is very fascinating indeed. And
thank you, Mangesh, for giving us this opportunity to talk. Thank you so much.
yes, so people are already demanding another lecture from you. So let's hope in the future we can find the ways to have the lectures continue, thought process continue.
Well, why not? If some other chapter of the book interests some people, I can talk about it also.
Yes. So there comes a time where we have to say goodbye to each other, but it's a very beautiful occasion, that 67th anniversary, where millions of people, at least 1 million, will gather tomorrow at Diksha Bhumi to celebrate this great historical rupture, where millions have taken refuge in the Buddha Dhamma and the Sangha. And as the time progresses, millions and millions will follow up in the footsteps of the great leader, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who has given us a kind of thinking tool to think through what has happened in Indian history in terms of the revolution and counter-revolution. So thank you so much, Brother Frederic. It's lovely to have you. And
thank you, everybody.
Thanks to all of you for joining today, and see you in the next occasion and meet Brother Frederic in person soon.
My great pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim Ram.